Ladies and gentlemen, it's crunch time. I'm Jefferson Penrod. The clock is running, so let's go to work. You know that this is what I had to start with. BYU beats Utah 24-21 on Saturday in Provo. Great environment. I was able to be there. Wonderful game. Probably more so for me than for Jackson. Sorry, Jackson. BYU got it done. I talked about last week how I wasn't sure how things would go after the Arizona game and that a lot of it would come down to game plan. And that proved to be the case. The players played well, but I think ultimately the game plan is what won this game for BYU. Let's talk about it. Bear Bachmeier, 13 of 22, 166 yards, a touchdown, no interceptions, 11 carries for 64 yards and a touchdown with a one run that will go down in history of the rivalry. LJ Martin played very well, 26 carries, 122 yards. BYU +2 in the turnover margin with a muff punt in the first half and then a Tanner Wall interception. BYU won the time of possession by around 2 minutes. And all of this despite the fact that Utah had the edge in third down efficiency. They were 5 of 12 as opposed to BYU, who was only 3 of 12. Total yards, Utah had more total yards and won in rushing yards and passing yards. And the difference was that for most of this game, BYU controlled the pace and the flow of the game. That's the reason they won. It wasn't because they were explosive on offense or that they had a million takeaways or they just didn't let Utah move the ball. It was because BYU played their game, their brand of football, and it paid off. You know, a lot of times you think of these teams and they just blow everyone out. BYU I don't think is built to do that with a lot of teams. But that's because BYU plays slow. They play to their pace, and it's very effective. It may not look like a big win on the score sheet, but that doesn't mean that BYU didn't control this game. Now, granted, Utah played very well. Utah made mistakes. I think that would be another difference. Utah made more mistakes than BYU, whether that's the turnovers or play decisions or play calls or decisions to go for it on fourth down and leave points on the board. Now, granted, BYU also left some points on the board that they could have taken, but at the end of the day, BYU got it done and now turns to Iowa State this week, which will be a very tough matchup. We'll get to that in a second. And on the Utah side, yes, you have 2 conference losses, but that doesn't mean you're out of it yet. We've seen crazy things happen in the Big 12. And remember, your 2 losses are to probably the best 2 teams in the Big 12. I would still say that Utah is right there in the conference race and at least in the top parts of the Big 12. I think Utah should be ranked. Again, we'll get to this in just a second. But overall, very big win for BYU, taking them to 7-0, third straight win over Utah, and just it was a fun game. Probably more fun for me than for Jackson. But at the end of the day, BYU gets it done. And let's talk about the Big 12, because the Big 12 looks very, very interesting now after this weekend. Obviously, BYU beating Utah, but Texas Tech falls to Arizona State. Yes, Texas Tech was playing without their starting quarterback, but still losing to Arizona State in Tempe. And so let's talk about the Big 12 and some of the standings there. At the top are BYU and Cincinnati, who are both 4-0 in conference play. Cincy, by the way, surprising everyone. If you looked back at our preseason predictions for BYU and Utah, me and Jackson both were convinced that Cincinnati would be terrible, and they are not. They look very good. Their schedule has been somewhat favorable. They won't play Texas Tech or Arizona State or Houston, but they will end up playing both BYU and Utah later in the season. At 3-1 in conference play are Houston, Texas Tech, and Arizona State. Houston's loss coming to Texas Tech, Texas Tech's loss coming to Arizona State, and Arizona State's loss obviously coming at the hands of Utah. And then at 2-2, but still not out of it, are teams like Iowa State, Utah, and TCU. There are more 2-2 teams in conference play, but I don't think they'll end up being factors later on in the season. But those 2-2 teams are not out of it. If they run the table, they still have a chance. Remember, last year, the teams at the top of the Big 12 had 2 conference losses. So still a long way to go, a lot of football to be played in the Big 12 for this conference race, excuse me. So it should be a lot of fun as we come down the stretch. And of note, here are the Big 12 teams that are ranked. At number 11 in the AP Top 25, you have BYU. Number 14, dropping 7 spots after their loss, is Texas Tech. At number 21 is Cincinnati. And 24, coming back in the rankings, is Arizona State. It's kind of a travesty that Houston and Utah are not ranked. Houston's only loss is to Texas Tech, and Utah's 2 losses are to 2 top 15 teams. And against everyone else, they've looked very, very good. So I think that they deserve to be ranked, and the Big 12 needs some more respect because it's kind of, at this point, hypocritical to see how the SEC is being treated, where all these teams are beating each other, and yet they all stay very high because they're good losses. But the same respect isn't being given to the Big 12. And I think with how college football has changed between NIL and the transfer portal, these teams are a lot closer than people think. And I think that the Big 12 deserves to have more respect than the SEC is letting them have, if that makes sense. Or they deserve to have more respect and be closer to the SEC in people's minds than they actually are. So, college football going to be very, very fun coming down the stretch here, especially here in the Big 12, which I am partial to as a BYU fan. But should be a lot of fun all over the country. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back in just a second. Don't go anywhere. If you're enjoying the show, make sure to check out the Game 7 podcast, where I, along with my co-host Jackson Jones, look at the biggest stories and make predictions for the biggest games each week. Welcome back to Crunch Time. It's time for our 2-minute drill. I'm going to get the clock ready. The clock will start in 3, 2, 1. We have a Game 7 in sports tonight. The Mariners and the Blue Jays will play for the chance to go to the World Series and face the Los Angeles Dodgers for all the glory that comes with winning the World Series. After Toronto won Game 6 last night, 6-2, it all comes down to a Game 7 in Toronto tonight, as the Mariners look to go to the World Series for the first time ever, and the Blue Jays look to go to the World Series for the first time since 1993, all for the chance to play the Dodgers, who may be so good that there will be a lockout in 2027, won't even have baseball. But that's a conversation for another day. So no matter who you want to win in this series, make sure that you're rooting for them to beat the Dodgers in the World Series if you want to see baseball. There was a wild game in the NFL yesterday. The Broncos had a massive comeback against the New York Giants in Denver. Denver scored all 33 of their points in the fourth quarter, winning 33-32 on a last-second Will Lutz field goal. This was kind of just an epic collapse from the Giants. They led at points 19-0 and 26-8. That 26-8 lead coming under 7 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. The Broncos able to come back. And lastly, the NBA season is here, ladies and gentlemen. Opening night in the NBA is tomorrow, Tuesday, October 21st. There are 2 fun matchups that we have. We have Kevin Durant and the Houston Rockets. That's weird to say, but we're going to get used to it. Going to Oklahoma City, a bit of a awkward homecoming for Kevin Durant as OKC looks to defend their title, and then Golden State going to LA to play the LeBron-less Lakers. By the way, the NBA is back on NBC, so get ready to hear that great music, which I can't play for copyright reasons all the time. And that will do it for the 2-minute drill. It was closer than we've been previously, but we got it done. And that will do it for this episode of Crunch Time. Thank you so much for tuning in. However you may be watching or listening, make sure to follow the show on Instagram at CrunchTimeWithJeffy. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe and like. And if you're listening on podcasts, make sure you follow us. We'll be right back here later this week. But until then, take care.